standpoint is that we're recording. Oh, I'm not recording, sorry. But whoever is chairing the meeting, just wait until you see live on YouTube in the top left corner of your screen, and that will be your cue to start. My name's Dave, and Bill Lamer from my team. We're both here. We're gonna hide and mute, but we'll be in the background. Stephanie has my phone number, so we'll be able to chat if there's any issues. But if you all are ready to go, we'll get out of your way.
Hi, Bill. I just wanted to say hi, Bill. Haven't seen you in a while. How you doing?
Yeah, it's 6:01 according to my clock.
Are you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna hit live on YouTube now.
Okay, it's about a 20-second delay, so don't be afraid of silence.
Asking me to sign in. So give me a second.
She's upstairs. I think she's getting ready. Oh, I don't know. I think she's gonna meet Monica. They're looking for.
Okay, so it won't let me stream, Dave. It says I don't have permission.
The host.
Yep. Is it because I'm not on my Zoom and it's on yours?
Oh, that shouldn't be it.
It says you do not have permission to live stream.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you want me to try on my account?
Beth, what do you want to do?
Whatever we need to do, because we do tell people they can go to YouTube. I don't have the option here either.
Yep.
Yeah, so Stephanie, if you give me the host duties back, I
Sure
can.
will. Okay.
And then I can make you a co-host.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, let me try to stream.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Citizens Police Review Board meeting of January 26th. I'm pleased that board members have joined us, as well as citizens of the Pittsburgh area. Tonight, we have with us a quorum for the board. We have Mr. Walters, Mr. Green, Dr. Gershio, Ms. McClellan, and Sister Patrice. Okay. So I call the meeting to order at this time. And the first business is to approve the minutes of 12/1. Are there any corrections or additions? No corrections or additions. And I'm going to use the new Robert Rules of Order that indicates if there are no corrections or additions, the minutes can stand approved as distributed. Thank you. Now, I'm sorry. Sister Patrice.
I had nothing to say. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. We will move to the opening remarks by the chair. And what I would like to share with you is that Ms. Pittinger and myself have written a case study that will appear in a book that's coming out. The book is on police and social work. So our case study has been accepted, and we will let you know when the book will be published.
Awesome.
Congratulations to both.
They're trying to get us to write more, but Beth is busy, I'm busy. So I'm not sure about that. But it was fun, really. And I was especially pleased when the author said we had passed the test and he accepted it. Okay. Some members did attend the workshop this weekend, and I think Beth is going to make some comments about that in her report. So we will proceed with the meeting tonight as indicated with any other board business we need to cover, case reviews, and then we will have comments from the public. So at this time, is there anything else that the board needs to cover on the board business? Okay, we will move down to the executive director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members and guests. Nice to see everyone. Happy New Year greetings. I hope we all stay safe and stay well. We have recently heard a lot about no-knock warrants. A community activist led by the Alliance for Police Accountability, they started a petition drive to put the question on a home rule charter amendment for Allegheny County to bar no-knock warrants in the county. As part of the Black Lives Matters reimaging police project that's led by Councilman Burgess and Councilman Lavelle, they picked up an interest in that issue of no-knock warrants. And they well, I guess it might have been, I don't know, maybe the 8th of not too long ago, they proposed legislation to ban no-knock warrants in the city of Pittsburgh. That legislation I distributed among members last night. And that's what it does. It just says that they can't use no-knock warrants in the city of Pittsburgh. We know that in Pennsylvania, police are required to knock and announce themselves before barging into a residence. It's a unique contradiction or a risk where no-knock warrants are permitted and where there may be a castle doctrine or a protection doctrine that allows a resident to defend their home. If the police come barging in your house and you shoot at them, you have the right to shoot at them and they have the right to come into your house like that. You have a real dangerous situation. Now, fortunately, we don't have that here, but just to punctuate the whole prohibition and minimizing risk to everybody, council has this proposal on the table. And because there are aspects to it, we know that warrants are executed on a regular basis by law enforcement. It's a necessity. There is a process by which the risk associated to a warrant is established. And that goes to the planning of an execution of a search warrant and an assessment of the tactical competence that's necessary to execute it safely. And so when we talk about these things, it always helps to have experts. And I invited and graciously Master Police Officer Steve Meskin accepted the invitation to come and have a little bit of a discussion and share with you his views and experience related to the execution of search warrants and perhaps opine a bit on the content of the proposal in front of City Council. Steve has been a leader of the SWAT team for many, many years and has developed a national reputation as well as a renowned expert on special weapons and tactics. So he's quite the expert, and I'm very delighted and very grateful to you, Steve, for joining us tonight. In association to this discussion, I did ask our solicitor, Bill Ward, to give a brief or be prepared to share with you a brief overview of the legal foundations of search warrants, status of no-knock warrants, federal and state standards that apply to search warrants. So, Bill, Steve, do either of you wish to go first?
Perhaps I could go first because we'll get the boring part out of the way and follow up with Steve's more dynamic presentation. I could trace the evolution of the Fourth Amendment from like 1791 to the present, but I'm going to spare you that and try to give you some relevant considerations as it might apply to the issue at hand. For the most part, when people focus on the search warrant requirement of the Fourth Amendment, and I'll provide that text, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, etc. I'll just stop there with persons and houses in view of the Breonna Taylor issue. But no warrant shall issue unless there's probable cause, which has been sworn by an oath or an affirmation to a judge or a magistrate, or in the federal system, the United States magistrate judge. So much of the case law that's evolved over the decades, if not centuries, has pertained to the issuance of these warrants. But today it's different. What we're focusing on today is the execution of the warrant. So I'm not going to get into case law or statutes or rules of criminal procedure that deal with how a search warrant or an arrest warrant should be issued, other than to say, as constitutionally required, it prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. So when we do talk about warrants, keep in mind that there are two types. Basically, this is search warrant to go into identified premises and to search and perhaps seize evidence believed to be part of a crime, but there are also arrest warrants. And the legislation that's proposed by the city of Pittsburgh for no-knock does apply to both. And that provides in the definition section of the ordinance that any document issued by a legal or governmental official authorizing the police to make an arrest or to search a premises. Some of the similarities between the federal system and the state system have evolved over the years. For example, there's an expectation that a warrant would be served during the day, but that's defined both by the federal law and the state law as 6 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night. So quite frequently, at least in the federal system and probably in the state system as well, warrants are executed at 5 minutes after 6 o'clock in the morning because people are still, for the most part, still in bed at that time. And that provides for a legitimate, lawful daytime search. You can get a nighttime search, but you have to have certain circumstances which would authorize that and provide the magistrate judge with enough information to authorize a nighttime execution of a warrant. One difference between the federal and the state is that the shelf life, if you will, of a search warrant in the state is 2 days, whereas in the feds, it's 14 days. The no-knock ban takes into consideration what a no-knock is. And I think we're pretty clear, but just since we're recording this and there might be people who would be not quite as familiar as some of the people I see on the presentation today, a no-knock warrant is a search warrant authorizing police officers to enter certain premises without first knocking and announcing their presence or purpose to entering the premises. So how do you define what a no-knock warrant is? They're lawful in many jurisdictions, but this is the result of what we're seeing following the Breonna Taylor case, is that the laws are starting to change. As far as a lawful no-knock warrant, the idea is presently that there is much that can go wrong with that. And we've seen it not only in Breonna Taylor, but as the ordinance points out, there were other cases as well in New York and other jurisdictions. So the federal government has already taken an effort to give me one second here, to address this. In the Federal Narcotics Code, under Section 879, that did provide for a search warrant relating to offenses involving controlled substances that may be served at any time of the day or night if the judge or United States magistrate judge issuing the warrant is satisfied there's probable cause to believe the grounds exist for the warrant and for its service at such time. So up until recently, that basically said, go for it. You can do this under federal law for a drug case as long as you have probable cause and you have circumstances that are considered reasonable. Keep in mind that the standard for all this under the Fourth Amendment is reasonableness, because you're entitled to be safe from unreasonable searches and seizures. I don't know if this is passed yet, but there is a proposal or proposed legislation to modify the narcotics statute that expressly authorizes search warrants without knocking to now require the following. Under the amendment, it would say a search warrant authorized under this section shall require that a law enforcement officer execute the search warrant only after providing notice of his or her authority and purpose. That's a big step in terms of federal narcotics investigations. As Beth mentioned, though, the state has already anticipated much of this. Under the Rule 207 of the Pennsylvania Rules of Criminal Procedure, that provides that a law enforcement officer who is executing a search warrant shall, in other words, must, before entry, give or make reasonable effort to give notice of the officer's identity, his authority, and his purpose to any occupant of the premises specified in the warrant, unless exigent circumstances require the officer's immediate forcible entry. And those exigent circumstances tend to focus more on destruction of evidence or safety to the arresting officer. So for every rule, there is an exception, and there's one there as well. But I think Beth is correct that that under the rules of criminal procedure in Pennsylvania, that the expectation is that a daytime warrant will be executed following the officer announcing and giving notice of his identity, authority, and purpose to the resident. So what we have is a city council proposal that also follows a similar state legislative proposal. In August of 2020, Senator Tim Carney from Delaware County introduced legislation, or at least issued a co-sponsorship memorandum for the banning of the no-knock warrant searches. That was going to be called Breonna's Law. I noted that in December, specifically December 8th, Senator Carney is still enlisting or trying to get others to be co-sponsor to his proposed legislation. The thing that I find similar in the state legislative proposal when compared to the city of Pittsburgh legislative detail is that they both would require a minimum of 15 seconds following the announcement, or the knock, if you will, before allowing the officers to gain access to the residence. So it's not knock, announce, and go through the door. There is an express time period, both in the state and in the city, of 15 seconds, which can go awfully quickly if you're upstairs brushing your teeth and you didn't hear the knock on the front door. So that's where the concept of reasonableness comes in. The United States Supreme Court has been dealing with the issue of reasonableness of no-knock warrants since 1963. They teed it up again in 1995, 25 years ago, and considered it an element or something to consider for the overall reasonableness of whether the execution of a search warrant was constitutional. So I'll take questions, but the good stuff is going to come up with our next speaker. But are there any legal questions that anyone might have that I didn't address or need response? Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, it's just a moment when you said 15 seconds, when I read that, if I'm a senior citizen, and I'm kind of a slow mover, that's not very much time. And I think they did that to an elderly woman by Vivian Bay not too long ago. It was a wrong address, but nonetheless, that 15 seconds, I don't even think you could walk, I don't know, from your bedroom to the door in that period of time. So that kind of concerned me was that time element.
I think it's probably a balancing test as to what's reasonable. And part of the concern is what's happening on the other side of the door. Are people flushing evidence down the toilet? Or are they trying to sneak out the back door as you knock and announce on the front door? I just found it interesting that both pieces of legislation proposed 15 seconds, which to me, I think from personal experience of having a 2-bedroom home, it would take me more than 15 seconds to get out of bed at 6:02 in the morning to wake up and then, wander down the stairs to greet the officers who may have just come through my front door, even after 30, 40, 50 seconds. So what the legislation is trying to do, I think, is quantify what they perceive to be a reasonable amount. The scary thing is what happens if it's 16 seconds or 14 seconds. So this is where I think Steve can provide some insight. But are there any more additional legal questions that perhaps I could answer? I mean, they have whole courses on Fourth Amendment and search and seizure, which take up a whole semester. And I just try to give you a quick overview about execution of warrants as opposed to issuance.
One statement before Steve starts is that typically the seniors aren't going to have warrants issued for their address. And I do understand that mistakes can happen, but that's typically not where the warrants are issued for.
I'm just thinking of someone living with their mom because and the mom is elderly and has no idea what's really going on, and the kid's not around and they're banging on the door. And so I think you see more and more of these families, the family dynamic being a little more different than the person that's 40 some living on their own. But it was just, when I read it, I was like, wow, 15 seconds. At least they give me 45 seconds to set my alarm to get out the door, So that's all I was thinking. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Beth. Should we go to Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. That was great. And thank you for bringing up Ms. Taylor. I did neglect to provide that in the introduction. The nationwide uproar about no-knock warrants was pursuant to the death of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. She's 26-year-old, full-time emergency room technician. Did have a former boyfriend who was suspected of dealing with drugs, and allegedly the narcotics unit that executed the warrant at her home may have made that execution plan on bad information. But at any rate, as a result of that fiasco, that's where the concern and this movement came to really scrutinize the use of no-knock warrants. And as one who would tactically be an operator involved in doing that, Steve, could you share your experience and your thoughts about this proposed legislation and whatever else you can do to enlighten us so we're well informed about the proposal in front of City Council?
Sure, Beth. Can everybody hear me? Thanks for having me. Just a little bit about my background. I've been a police officer with the City of Pittsburgh for 27 years. I've been with the Tactical Operations Section, which is responsible for the leadership, tactical deployment, training, and execution. In this case, what we're talking about today, search warrants. I've been responsible in that position since 1999, early 2000. I'm also the Eastern Director for the National Tactical Officers Association, which is a nonprofit organization nationally recognized, similar to the International Association of Chiefs of Police. But our concentration are the professional development of tactical operations and standards for tactical teams across the United States. I act as one of 9 directors that work on standardizing tactical operation procedures, deployment options, things like that, to further professionalize law enforcement tactical teams. So as Bill was talking about earlier, and I think where I kind of want to start this discussion a little bit, to kind of bring everybody into queue as to far as Pennsylvania. First and foremost, no-knock search warrants have never existed in the state of Pennsylvania. So we're way ahead of the game from that perspective. Though we are banning them, but we welcome the legislation. I don't think it's a bad thing. Rule 207, which Bill talked about, reasonableness. When we talk about breaching a door, and that's the opening of the door during the execution of a search warrant, there have to be articulable facts for us to do so. So just because the judge, and I'll kind of speak in layman's terms, but just because the judge says we can go in, doesn't mean we can just go in without articulable facts when we get to the location. And I believe Mary talked about, hey, listen, what about elderly people and, things like that and the family dynamics that may come into play? That's all built on intelligence, meaning if we're going to go execute a search warrant at a location, we're going to have a lot of intelligence on that location. Now, what you've seen, in different things, different mistakes across the country, and Beth brought it up, is lack of information and lack of gathering of intelligence to put together a comprehensive plan to address potential contingencies. So if you, I did have a chance to review the information that Beth pulled out, and I watched the video in particular. And if you watch that video, one of the key things that you see in, the tragedy that happened here was the SWAT team is executing a search warrant across the city, and this group of officers executes a search warrant somewhere else across the city. And when things went bad at the location where Breonna Taylor was living, you saw the tactical officers say very key things like, well, what's going on? Where are they at? But we didn't know that was happening. There, you saw basically, like A versus B difference in execution of a search warrant. Oftentimes, mistakes are made because there's urgency. And when I say urgency, sometimes the urgency is actually necessary. Meaning in the Breonna Taylor case, they said, hey, we got to go over to this location because we think the guy is over there. Well, what's the urgency to do so? And oftentimes that urgency doesn't exist other than the furtherance of the investigation. So particularly in the city of Pittsburgh, we have established and longstanding, I've had a great working relationship with Beth since, 2003 or so. But we operate on what's called priority of life. And what that basically means is, though the laws were written, for drug enforcement, which Bill kind of went over and articulated that, hey, listen, this is about the destruction of evidence, preserving evidence and things like that. The focus of a tactical search warrant or the execution of a search warrant is to further an investigation. We do not prioritize the evidence over life. However, when you get into things like the Castle Doctrine and people protecting their location, the first thing you get into, and which you guys discussed here as a group very, very quickly, was, hey, nobody heard, or I won't be able to hear. It'll take me 15 seconds or more to get to the door, things like that. As a practice in the city of Pittsburgh, when we execute a search warrant, we use a PA system in addition to the knock and announce at the door. So when you saw in the Breonna Taylor case, you saw the neighbors. Hey, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear what was going on. I can tell you that in the city of Pittsburgh, the neighbors are extremely annoyed with the SWAT team when we show up, because the loud announcement that's going on, which will sound something like this. This is the city of Pittsburgh Bureau of Police SWAT team. We have a search warrant for 123 Main Street, surrender the residence. And we repeat that over and over and over and over and over, and even longer than that on the beginning of the search warrant. And we're trying to do three things, actually. A, obviously communicate with the individuals that we're executing the search warrant. B, alert residents in the neighborhood, okay, that we are executing a search warrant, and this is the police. We know statistically across the country that bad guys, and there are bad people out in our society, but bad guys rip off bad guys. And oftentimes bad guys portray themselves as police ripping off other bad guys. So the last thing we want on our shoulders as tactical professionals is us putting our operators and officers in situations that puts them at unnecessary risk. And sometimes you think, well, don't you want to go up there quietly and, try to get the drugs? Yeah, well, that's the focus of our investigation, but that is not the priority. So when we talk about priorities and of the investigations and priorities of the search warrant, they may not exactly line up. And I'll further explain that. So when Bill talked about reasonable, the exigency clause in Rule 207, meaning, people say, hey, could we wait 15 seconds? There have been times when we've waited 1 minute and 30 seconds, 2 minutes at the door because we had movement. There are times where we've had movement in such a manner that we've backed off the door, surrounded the location, and called everybody out. Okay. And you would say, well, why didn't you go in, Steve? There's guys running up the stairs. And we saw FBI officer Sam Hicks in 2009 be murdered during the execution of a search warrant where officers breached the door after the suspect inside began to move around. That suspect had a violent history against police. And the wife of that suspect was at the top of the stairs and fired one shot, hitting Sam Hicks in the throat. And subsequently he died at the scene. So what was the purpose? What's the purpose to enter? And when we talk about comprehensive planning process, we look at the investigation and the need to enter the structure first and foremost. What intel do we have? Who's in there? Elderly people, children, things like that. All that's taken into consideration. And then we develop a tactical plan around that situation. So you may see like on TV shows, which Hollywood does us no justice in policing, I can tell you that. But that, it's just a simple of everybody mounting up on a vehicle and we just ride to the location and everything goes well. There's a lot of time and effort, sometimes days, even weeks, depending on the complexity of the execution of that search warrant that goes into the planning process. And oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but sometimes the execution right up to the minute we're about to do it, something can change in the environment that would cause us to abort that mission and not execute that search warrant. What would cause that would be a change in the environment that puts innocent bystanders, okay, people not the target of the investigation. And you say, well, Steve, who's innocent bystander in a house that's selling dope? Well, if we're looking for the bad guy and he's Jim Jones and he lives upstairs, but mom and his sister and cousin all live in the house, we consider those individuals innocent bystanders if they're not subject of the investigation. So they become our priority. So the execution of that search warrant is around their safety and obviously even the safety of the suspect, but our priority are those innocent bystanders. The exigency that may exist for us to breach the door is usually to open the door and communicate. So lots of times everybody assumes that the minute the door is breached and is open, the SWAT team is immediately, or officers are immediately going in. Usually the barrier to communication is the structure. So we've seen a high amount of success of breaching the door, holding at the door and calling people out and they go, oh, it is the police. Because, if right now, if I turned off my camera and you guys couldn't even look at me and I said, yeah, this is the police, all you have is the voice. You have no visual recognition. So am I telling you the truth or am I not? Do you trust me at 6 o'clock in the morning? People respond to things visually and audit with, their ears to hear things. That allows them to interpret information and make better decisions. So, if I'm a guy and I'm scared and I'm at the top of my stairs and I say, hey, it's the police outside. Well, how can I confirm that? Well, usually visually, they can see uniforms, lights, hear announcements outside. That can de-escalate the situation to a level where we can communicate and get the suspect to come out. So though there's a lot of emphasis on the breach of the door, the crossing of the threshold is really where the potential problem may be. That being said, Bill brought up night versus day. Why would we do it at 6:05? Why not do it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Why not noon? Lots of times that's driven strictly by the activity that is going on in the location. It also may include who's there at that time, meaning during the daylight, mom and grandma come over because they visit with the kids, they babysit, but they're not there till 9 o'clock. Another reason for early morning search warrants can be to avoid the school buses. So in other words, we're going to be on a street and we're executing a search warrant and kids are standing out, as early as 7 o'clock, things like that, maybe waiting for a school bus. It's not something we want those kids to A, experience, B, be trapped in. And in the worst case scenario where, God forbid a shootout should occur, there they are standing out in the street by themselves. So the environment in which and the location in which we're going to serve the warrant is definitely taken into consideration, and the surroundings, what time of day, is it a school day versus a weekend? Is it summertime versus wintertime? Things like that. So the night versus day exception, very rarely, I can tell you in my career, in the almost 21 years that I've been doing this, I've executed probably, I'm going to put it somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 20 search warrants, maybe 25 search warrants, which had a nighttime exception. And those were for murder suspects, things like that. Very, very high level investigation that might be going on, where it involved some type of prior to life or tracking an individual who was involved in a homicide. I can't remember a time where we had a nighttime exception for a search warrant strictly for drugs, at least, in my experience, because there's a couple things surrounding that. Number one is it puts the officers at unnecessary risk. 10 o'clock at night seems more reasonable, meaning, people are usually up watching TV. Some people are going to bed, but when you start getting past 11, midnight, things like that, it starts to become very dangerous because people are disoriented, and who's coming to somebody's house at 1 o'clock in official capacity. So unless prior to life exists that drives us for that time frame, we're not going to execute a search warrant during that time, even in the event that a judge would allow it. So let's just assume that the investigator says, hey, I have a nighttime exception for this particular investigation. We may say, hey, listen, we're going to wait because based on priority life, to include our safety, and we actually, the officers and everybody involved, it will be safer to execute this warrant at this time. So based on that, I'll just take some questions now, based on because I know I've thrown a lot at you. I can probably talk on this topic for about 3 days. Like Bill said, we could talk on it for a week, but maybe we get some questions and allow you guys to, yes, sir, Tom.
Hi, thank you, Steve. I believe I remember you talking at the Citizens Police Academy. It was
Sure.
one of the best sessions I attended. It taught me so much. And I appreciate you bringing some of those details today, helping people recognize that every incident is unique in and of itself.
Yes.
And the tragedy of Breonna Taylor is huge, we can't just use it as a cookie cutter as to how every search warrant execution goes. So I really appreciate you talking about the detail of your planning. I think I have two things. I'd like you to talk a little bit more. Well, I hope you talk a little bit more about your investigation and information gathering. And the second is, Mr. Ward mentioned the exception for police officers' safety. And specifically, the piece of that I want to bring up is that we know that data shows us that everyone, including police officers, can perceive danger differently if the person is an African American. They may perceive the African American to be larger and weigh more and just be more dangerous. And so could you talk a little bit about what you as officers do so that you combat some of that implicit bias so that you do the best job for everyone, including yourselves?
Sure. I'll start with the last question and work my way backwards. But basically, when it comes down to these, different theories of why police act the way they do, we'll go to root cause, and that's where I really like to go. And the root cause is lack of training. And when we talk about lack of training, is What makes a person competent in anything they do? Training. So I'm gonna, and not to belittle the severity of what we're talking about, but when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and they play a game for an hour on a Sunday, and they probably spend somewhere between 40 and maybe 60 hours preparing for that 1 hour game. And they have state-of-the-art facilities, state-of-the-art training, equipment, doctors, everybody to support their activity. They still drop passes. They still miss tackles. They still make mistakes, even after all that training weekly. Police officers are giving their initial training in the academy and then are supported by maybe 16 to 24, maybe 40 hours of training for the whole year. And then you're asking them to go out and use instruments, in this case, handguns, handcuffs, tasers, OC pepper spray, respond to various situations, etc. Okay, with little or no training or updated training. So, and then you're putting them in life or death situations. So think about it from the perspective of the athlete that's out there having a bad game and he's dropping, every pass that's thrown to him. And they're like, hey, we got to get on the practice field next week and we got to straighten this out. But we don't look at police officers in the field and say, hey, you know what? That was a poor performance. Let's get them in a training environment and increase it. Now, unfortunately, it's based on cost prohibitive training facilities, training time, things like that come into play. But we're talking the difference between life or death operations and a game. And we put a lot of effort into a game, 60 hours a week, preparing for it. And we don't put a tenth of that into preparing for these missions. Now, that's to say that we'll call it the regular police officer on the street, the patrol officer. Fortunately for my department in the city of Pittsburgh, the SWAT team is very well supported, and our training regiment exceeds the national standard. And the national standard is a minimum of 16 hours of entry training a month. And then all our support personnel, our snipers and explosive breachers and everybody else that does all kinds of different work have an additional training time in excess of sometimes 40 hours in a month for that, which obviously the performance is going to be better. That's just a fact. That does not make us, absent of mistakes. However, the thing that's key that you will see in SWAT teams that you don't see in patrol activity is because it's a team environment, we act similar to sports teams, meaning this: we will plan a warrant, just like a game. We'll then go out and execute that warrant, and we'll say what went well and what went poorly. And we'll come and do an after-action review immediately after that operation and sit down and pick apart in great detail. Okay, hey, what could we have done better? Now, these may even be things that nobody saw. It really didn't have any outcome on the operation. Nobody was in danger, just minor things that most people would say, oh, what's the big deal? Well, we look at it as a big deal because we are striving for perfection in the tactical community that we know we'll never achieve. However, we're going to continue to strive for that. And maybe along that way, we'll kind of bump into a little bit of excellence. So if we can keep on that path, it provides us a goal, in front of us to constantly refine what we're doing. Unfortunately, just like in any trade or business, the more experience you get, you tend to think the better you're doing. But the problem is that true competence is defined by experience and training. And those two coupled together really raise competency level. And unfortunately, we say things like, well, got on the job training. Well, there's no such thing as on the job training. That's an experience. So when we look at what makes an officer better, we talk about, well, what kind of training can we give him? So when he goes out and has an experience, good, bad, or indifferent, he or she can recognize the difference, then make the corrections necessary or identify the gaps so that they can go back to the training environment and correct it. So similar to the football team looking at film on Monday going, look at these patterns. This was ridiculous. We've really got to sharpen this up. They're looking at those gaps and then refining and basing their training and focusing on those gaps. And then, Tom, if you could, I forgot your other question. If you could just give it to me real quick, because
can you say more about your investigation?
Oh, yes.
Planning. We did have a case before us. I don't remember how many years ago, which was about a warrant, and there was confusion about house numbers and what was this and what was that. And so talk a little bit about the things that you do to try to get all the details right.
Sure. So, how mistakes are sometimes made is lack of intel, or what you believe was actionable intel is not. So take, for example, we're looking at house number 123 on Main Street. It's a 2-story brick structure. And if you know, in the city of Pittsburgh, a lot of houses look the same. So upon that reconnaissance that we will do, we'll go out there and look at the house, and we'll use all kinds of things like Google Earth and pictures and things like that. And we'll confirm. But as you guys well know, living in the city of Pittsburgh, a lot of those houses are sometimes even chopped up inside, meaning it used to be a 5-bedroom home at one time. They've now turned it into a 3-bedroom apartment. And the stairwell that used to just go up to the bedrooms now is divided into 2 stairwells. One goes to apartment A, goes to apartment B. So oftentimes, because of informants giving information, witnesses, etc., they'll say, hey, listen, you go in the stairwell, and when you get in the stairwell, you make a left. You go up there, you make a right. When you get to the 3rd floor, there'll be 2 doors, one on the left, one on the right. Now, the one with the big scratch on the door, that's apartment A. Well, yeah, I just gave you a whole bunch of information that now you got to remember. So oftentimes those mistakes are lent to operator error, could be, or just bad intel, where the scratch on the door is not actually apartment A, it's apartment B, and apartment A is the other one. Now, in my career, I've only been involved in 3 instances where we hit the wrong location. Okay. And that's out of in excess of, I'm going to put it at 1,800 warrants. And in 2010, every 5 years, we do an analysis of our performance. And we were just under 0.000187% of the time, the city of Pittsburgh police hit the wrong door. So it's a pretty good percentage when you look at it. It's much less than 0.5% of the time. Human error is always going to be there. So the reconnaissance process, working with the detectives, using the resources available to us, and coupling and collaborating all that together to come up with a comprehensive plan, and then identifying that door is what we rely on pretty consistently to make sure that we're on the right target every single time.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Are there other questions or comments? Thomas, I want to say you and I are thinking alike tonight, and that's a good thing. Because go ahead.
Ma'am. No,
because I was thinking some of the same things. How do you determine before you get to a location that is the correct location? And you just covered that. And I appreciate you talking about the training that you received. One comment I do want to make is that there is a component that is above you, and it's systemic in terms of the integrative processes that provides another sensitivity. And that is with cultural diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity within units, so that you have another level of sensitivity with the populations that you possibly have to deal with.
Right. And I think that's coupled with the professionalism and the training and the development of the police department. So whether you're looking at the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police or you're looking at the Sacramento Bureau of Police in California, when you talk about where are the gaps, it's in the training, which provides the foundation for future growth. If you don't have good foundational training, you will have poor performance. Hence, poor performance leads to criticism. Also, lack of recognition by the department that they have to continue to grow, continue to train, continue to develop. And one of the things that I did want to talk about in regards to the legislation that concerned me. And you say, well, Steve, what could concern you about the legislation? And I want to say that, looking at the legislation, I think it's great, but I think it went a little overboard. And follow me just for a second when I say overboard. So we're all about recording the search warrant, having body cams, all that stuff. That's not a problem. But by putting a requirement of 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after may put innocent people in jeopardy. And let me tell you why. Oftentimes we will deal with informants, witnesses, family members, things like that either have to ID, locate, talk to detectives. Hey, where does he keep the gun? It's like up in the bedroom, things like that. If we're continuing to videotape that is later discoverable by the defendant. And now that security of that witness or informant or family member or neighbor that we were talking to is in jeopardy just by virtue that we have to continue videotaping even though the warrant is over. So, you know, I would stress, you know, you guys as a body and council, if I had the opportunity to talk to them, to say, I understand the intent of the making sure nothing happens before and after, but really 5 minutes before the warrant, here's what they're going to get on video. Guys driving. That's what it's going to be, because we're going to be going from wherever we started to the location 5 minutes before. And 5 minutes after, you know, as long as it doesn't involve, you know, the seizure of evidence, is usually when we're talking to informants, witnesses, neighbors, things like that. And, you know, 10 months down the road, if I'm talking to you as the neighbor and I say, hey, ma'am, did you see him? Oh, yeah, he was here yesterday. And okay, well, we've got him in custody. Oh, and you just say, you know, thanks, guys. We really appreciate the hard work you're doing. How does the suspect now interpret that? Oh, the neighbor called. You know, there could be bad lines drawn between information simply on a video that's presented 10 months down the road, a year down the road, things like that, that may put innocent people in jeopardy. So I would caution, you know, city council from a professional standpoint that 5 minutes after could potentially put innocent people in jeopardy unnecessarily and will cause officers to attempt to protect those innocent bystanders, which then will appear as though officers are doing something to manipulate the situation. Does that make sense? You know, like they're doing something nefarious when they're not. It's just like, no, hey, hold on, don't say anything. The camera's still on. Well, you know, if I'm talking to Beth and she's my witness and she goes, Steve, did you get Beth? You know, I tell her, keep quiet, don't say anything. Well, now it sounds like I'm trying to suppress evidence when actually I'm just trying to protect her. She's my confidential informant. She's my witness. She, you know, she's a neighbor that's, you know, that drew us there. Whatever the case may be, that could be a very dangerous thing for our citizens. So I would ask that you guys as a body maybe probe that with council and say, hey, listen, from a disciplinary standpoint, there has to be exceptions to those rules because innocent bystanders could be at risk by us just following the legislation. We'll call it, you know, as it's written.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
No, did anyone else have a question or comment? Yes, Mr. Green. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
All right. I simply wanted to express appreciation. This for me has been tremendously educational. I mean, I feel like I've attended a seminar free of charge. Yay. So I just want to say thank you. That's all.
Well, thanks for having me.
I want to say I stand with Elwin. That was an excellent presentation. And being a teacher, I really appreciate your presentation. You were so prepared, and we'll support the police in our role in any way that we can. But they're certainly lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, sister.
Anyone else?
All right, Beth. Well, listen, thanks for having me. And I've enjoyed a great working relationship with the Citizens Police Review Board for many, many years. I hope it continues. And if there's anything we can do to, you know, clear up and have these kind of conversations, we think this is healthy, you know, both for the community, the police, and obviously you guys as a governing body. Please don't hesitate. And I know Beth will. She does quite often, but if there's anything we can do with this legislation, please let me know. Beth, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Steve. Always a pleasure. And I really do rely on Steve's professional opinion on a lot of matters. And you've always been there for us, Steve. Thank you.
Beth, if it's okay with you, I'm going to exit because I have some other stuff to do.
Okay, thank you. Best to everybody.
All right.
Stay well.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you want me to continue, Dr. Darby?
Yes.
I do extend my apologies for some rambunctious canine here. And I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll just talk through them.
All right.
Thank you, Emma, for that opportunity to work with you on that article, by the way. That was fun. And it was interesting because it brought me back to an incident where I thought about things I hadn't thought about in a long time, but also about details that were telling, in retrospect. So it was a great experience, and thanks for that opportunity.
Well, think about the other requests now that you've said that.
Yeah, well, all right. Whatever we can do for the edification of the community.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we've had not been together since December 1st, and it's been fairly busy, even though we had the holidays and all of that in between. We did help with or have some discussion, Mr. Ward and I did, with a county council member. We've had discussion and an opportunity to look again at their revised ordinance that they're considering at the county level. They've blended the proposed ombudsman idea into the civilian review board legislation so that it would all be under one umbrella. I'm not sure where it stands right now in terms of their vote, but last week I reviewed the most recent version, and with all the caveats that we've talked about, and if something comes of it, it would be great. It would give people an opportunity to resolve some issues that they don't have a resource to help them with now. Met with the Scranton mayor. Similarly, they're trying to develop some sort of oversight for the Scranton Police Department. The mayor is Mayor Cognetti. She's a progressive, independent, concerned about the relationship between her police department and her community, and is trying to put something in place. So it was a good meeting with the mayor and her director of human resources, who's responsible for developing this oversight. And we'll help them any way we can as they move along. I'll keep you updated. On the 28th, I believe it was, of December, we participated in a press conference with BPEP and our friends and our partners to review and present some examples of how, in fact, there have been significant changes in the operations of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. We hear a lot about, demands for this, demands for that, defund the police, this, get rid of the police, have it democratically controlled, all of these things, as though there have been no changes. And we know that, that we're in the midst of a cultural change. It's slow, it's tedious, you push, you pull, you tug, you kick, you yell, you do all of those things. And we forget sometimes that we're in the midst of it actually happening. It's just that it's a very slow process. So we articulated a number of discrete items of change that have occurred in the last several years. We took with Mr. Stevens, Tim Stevens, we went back to a meeting that's from 2014, and we recapped those 6 years as to the changes that have occurred, what this current administration has committed to, and areas that we would like to see more emphasis on. But what our point was to just demonstrate that, yes, things have changed, and it's a much different operating environment and relationship between the police and the community than it used to be. Sometimes we forget, but there have been. And we have copies of all that material that will be posted on our website at some point. The website has been going through an overhaul. Stephanie, we saw a prototype of it yesterday, I believe. It looks really good. I think you'll all be pleased with it. It's a long time coming, but at any rate, you're going to like it. And we'll get this material up, and as we're participating in activities with our partners, we will make sure that it directly goes up on our website so it's easily available to the public. The no-knock warrant, we took care of that. The state law enforcement Citizen Advisory Commission met for its first time last week. Great group of people. I think they'll serve the governor well, and hopefully the level of interest from the state law enforcement professionals is significant and it's positive. So we hope that some of that discussion and whatever comes of those discussions will trickle down to the municipalities so that it serves the purpose of helping locals as well as the state. But it's an innovative effort on the part of Governor Wolf, and I'm delighted to be able to share our experience with that group. Last weekend was the 23rd Black and White Reunion sponsored Racial Justice Summit. There was a panel Friday night for young people, and then the full program all day Saturday. We participated in the panel in response to Enough is Enough, a documentary film that covered the deaths of Johnny Gamage and Jerry Jackson. Mr. Green, were you there? No, I thought, for some reason, I thought you might have been in there, but it was a good, I don't think any of you were actually at that panel. Yeah, oh, Dr. Gershio was, yes. And you were there Friday night too, to the youth group. The panel on Saturday morning, it consisted of Tim Stevens, Cyril Wecht, Lynn Hayes Freeland moderated, a young person who's an organizer for the Alliance for Police Accountability, Dina James, and there was somebody else. Well, I was there. Billy Jackson, the filmmaker. And it was an interesting discussion, you know, again, being able now in retrospect to see what has changed from where we were back in 1995 when those two tragedies occurred to where we are now. Good discussion. And then I attended another session that about changes and how policy emerges through government processes. That was moderated by Jam Hammond, who, by the way, has been appointed the director for this, the Commission on Human Relations in the city. Councilwoman Strasburger was a panel member of that group. We offered some suggestions and advice and shared some material with them, members of that panel, after the discussion. But it was good. He went through for the group how you start with a problem, define it, look at your options, and how you proceed through a legislator's lens and create policy. We emphasize that while legislators have their role to create the rule, the courts interpret those rules, and as a result, we end up with things like qualified immunity and some other standards that now we wish were other than they are, because they've proven to be somewhat problematic when we're seeking accountability. But at any rate, it was a good panel. Overall, I think they had 1,200 and some people attend the summit. It was virtual, so that's pretty good. And that's the largest attendance, I think, out of the 23 years of its existence. So really great listening to young people and getting some insight into what they're thinking about, how they're informing their demands or their options or whatever it is they're looking for. The contrast Friday night, we don't have a large active Native American community group here, you know, at least in the at the activist level. We had on this panel 2 young people, male and a female, from the Los Enos tribe from California, matched with 2 people here from Pittsburgh. And just the cultural contrast among them was fascinating. Didn't you think, Dr. Gershio? Yeah, it was just a whole different tenor of discussion.
Yeah, I was gonna say a whole different perspective.
Yeah. I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but the best way to describe it, at least sort of objectively, is that the Californian people, the 2 youngsters from out there, youngsters, listen to me. The young people, the young Native Americans, you could see within them how they've totally integrated their culture, the values, the mores, the traditions. When they introduce themselves, they introduce their grandmother. I mean, very, very compelling engagement, very mature discussion, very interesting definition of what they're seeking and why they feel that they need to change, or what the nature of the change is. And remember, I mean, they're sovereign nations, so that's a whole different ballgame compared to, I mean, they're trying to get the support of the federal government and adherence to treaties, whereas we're trying to get, you know, local police and people that live here working together. Different realm, perhaps. But then our two local individuals were much more animated. I don't know, they're impatient in contrast. That was probably the most stark contrast. Very, very impatient compared to acknowledgement from the other two that, you know, it's a progressive thing. It takes time. You've got to inform and help those coming along behind you and all of that. It was very interesting. And that was, I initially didn't expect to go to the Friday evening thing, and I'm glad that I did. All of these sessions are to be on YouTube. Is that correct, Stephanie? And they will be available on YouTube. So if there's any that pique your interest, you'll be able to catch them there. The Copies Bar report, we expect to be finished February 8th. We confirmed that today with Jeff and his associate. Website overhaul. We are still engaged in a performance audit out of the city controller's office. We answered round 3 of their questions a couple weeks ago, last week, maybe the week before. Hopefully it's coming to a close. I did reach out to the controller, and he identified who he wants me to contact to develop the protocols for the recent amendment to the charter that creates that relationship between us and the controller to conduct performance audits on the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. So I'll follow up with them. I told him, I told the controller, I don't want to, it was awkward because we're still in an active performance audit. And I didn't want to create any kind of a conflict or pressure or interrupt anything or just cause any kind of hard feelings. So anyway, that's resolved. I have the names, and we will follow up on that within the next week or so we can develop some protocols. I say the next week or so because the deputy controller recently was just recently hired. The former deputy controller went over to the city to be the city treasurer. So there's a new person at the controller's office in that position. And we have to give her time to get her feet wet. I think that, oh, no, there is one other matter. And that's the densist group.
Yeah.
Yes. I kept moving that down the list. Well, I can say after 60 some emails later, and as recently as this afternoon, and I want to extend a thank you to Stephanie for following up rather stridently with the city law department as to where is this contract and why isn't it available for us to sign it. We had another promise. Is that true, Stephanie? That it's, you want to share what he told you, please?
Yes, I spoke with the law department this morning via email, and he assured me that it would be expedited to OMB, our budget analyst, today, and go into DocuSign for signatures. He has everything. I don't know what the holdup's been. I'm pretty frustrated with him. I kind of told him today, politely, but because this has been going on for a long time, and $25,000 shouldn't take 10 months because we started this in June. So he assured me it should get in there today.
Not when you can put $26,000 of munitions on a credit card overnight, right? So hopefully it will go into DocuSign this week and we will have that resolved. There was I guess, a delay related to the insurance certificate. Mr. Ward is familiar with that. But the insurance certificate naming the city of Pittsburgh as insured with the Densest Group's insurance company. So we can document this journey, and hopefully we'll be able to sign, seal, and deliver it. Now, the gentleman did indicate 3 to 4 weeks for completion. So once we're signed, we'll be good. There wasn't an interest in proceeding to conduct interviews with people by Densest. But I said, no, we're not going to do anything that would jeopardize the integrity of the investigation or put anybody in a bad situation or breach a confidence or anything like that. So that's why we're still where we are. We're not going to go forward until it's signed. And they tell us we can expect that any day, similarly to what we expected back in the beginning of December. So hopefully this time it will happen. And I believe that's it, unless you have questions for me. If I've missed something or you want to know about something, just ask, please. I think that's it for me.
Anything for Ms. Pittinger?
Awesome.
Okay. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. That was quite a comprehensive report. So we can certainly see you've been very busy. Okay. Is there any unfinished business for this board?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this, I'm not sure where it should go, so you can send it on to Case if you wish, but we had a lot of media interaction over an incident involving a number of police officers who were on a duty assignment election day. Maybe some of you have seen it. Would you like me to report on that now or wait till you get case review or?
Is that included in the case review?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay. Why don't we take it now?
Okay. I'll just extend my report to include that. On November 3rd, election day, tensions were running high. And so there was a police presence as a just in case something should go wrong. And officers were working 12 hours, a 12-hour shift. As it turned out, there was no disruption, there was no commotion. And so the supervisors told the officers that were on duty, you can go on home. We'll pay you the 12 hours, but just go home. It doesn't look like we need you. Instead of going home, the officers went to a bar in the South Side and had food and drink and I guess a little carousing. And after that, they didn't adhere to COVID precautions. It resulted in at least 100 other officers having to be quarantined. And so it just turned into a mess. As a result, we understand that there was an investigation and discipline was pursued by the chief, everything ranging from a verbal or written reprimand to a suspension, transfer of duty locations. Pretty much they took it on right away and did something about it, which is a very positive thing. We were contacted not by any civilian, nobody filed a complaint. It's a situation you should be aware of, and if you wish for us to pursue it in some other manner, we will do so. But what I've done is I've responded to the media inquiries, indicating what we know, and recognizing that the positive in it all is that the chief did act promptly and did issue some discipline. I think the behavior of the actions of the officers were fairly, they were stupid and immature, and it was if you were getting home early, go home. They didn't. 17 of them went down, or 17, whatever. A number of them did. And as a result, it had an impact on the entire force. So unfortunate. I don't know that there isn't anything that we could do in terms of a recommendation because it's already been handled. That's the point of it. It's known what they did. Their supervisory chain of command has handled it, and it is what it is. But you should be aware of it. I'm not recommending we do anything further, but certainly whatever you want to do about it, we will do.
Go ahead, Thomas.
I agree with everything you just said about, I don't know that we need to do more. I think as a board member, one thing I would appreciate knowing is more about what training is offered to officers in terms of how to be professionals. Not just so that I understand how many hours of training or what type of training they receive around the importance of professionalism. That might be an interesting item to know more about. And I am really happy with the way the board, you and representing the board, have acted in this, and I'm glad to hear the chief took action. So thank you very much for that report.
You're welcome. We'll look into it. And you'll recall you were visited by the chief and the assistant chief to talk about the ramifications of consuming alcohol while on duty. Now, there could be a hair splitting here or whether or not they were on duty. They were still on the clock. You know, did they have to be in standby and ready to deploy? We don't know. But it's a relatively recent policy revision that should be front and center in their minds. And the fact that they disregarded that is also of concern. But we'll see what kind of professional development they have in terms of, you know, so much you can do. So much you can do to develop that maturity.
Other comments? Okay, well, Ms. Pittenger, you can keep us apprised of what other information you get on that situation. New business, any new business? If not, we will move on to the case considerations for tonight, and I will read them. We have no public hearings scheduled. We have 2 full investigations. They are case numbers 00221, 25220, 24720, 22720, 22520, 21420, and 20420. I'm sorry, no, not 204, just 214. May I have a motion to accept those cases for full investigation? Ms. McClellan moves. Okay, second. Dr. Gershio, it has been moved and properly seconded to hold full investigations for the cases that were identified. We have 2 cases for a 30-day extension. Mr. Green.
We didn't take the vote.
You're correct. We didn't take the vote. All in favor, aye. Oppose? The ayes have it. The motion carries. We have the 30-day extensions for case number 20420 and 19220. May I please have a motion for 30-day extensions on those 2 cases? Sister Patrice, motion second. Dr. Gershio, second. All in favor, aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. We have unsustainable 2. There are cases 13820 and 03819. May I please have a motion for the dismissal of those 2 cases? Mr. Waters, motion second. Sister Patrice, seconded. All in favor, aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, the motion carries. We have 1 that is unfounded, so it will be dismissed because it is unfounded, and that is case 24420. May I please have a motion? Sister Patrice motions, and Ms. McClellan seconds. All in favor, aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries. And there are two others that we need to consider, and I think we can take them together as well. Case number 9419, request to be withdrawn. And that is the client would like to withdraw the complaint. And the next one is dismissed because it is out of our jurisdiction. So may I please have a motion for those two, one to withdraw and one because it is out of our jurisdiction. Mr.
Make a motion.
Okay, Ms. McClellan made the motion, Mr. Waters seconded. All in favor, aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries. And as usual now, we've been getting updates. Oh, I'm moving ahead too fast. We have suspensions, and we have two cases for suspension, 1/12/20 and 3/20. And we would like to suspend 2/20 until, do we want to say January 2021? Is that date correct? Stephanie, what date do we want for that?
February 2021. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so both of those cases, 12/20 and 3/20, we would like to suspend until February for any further comments on those. So may I please have a motion? Ms. Green, a motion, Mr. Waters seconded. All in favor, aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries. And again, we do have the summaries of cases that Ms. Pittinger and Ms. Dorman have been providing to us so that we can see where some of the cases that have been with us longer are. So you have that report at the end of the case reviews. Any comments about any of those? Okay, no comments. All right. I do want to thank the investigators for all of the hard work that they do to make sure we have the reports every month. And we thank you, Ms. Dorman, for making sure you get all of that information to us as well. We will have our regular meeting next month on the 23rd, and it will be via Zoom again. At this time, we will take public comments. Do we have anyone who has indicated that they would like to make public comments?
Unmute yourself, Stephanie.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm trying to see if anyone's sent anything. I don't see it. I'm not sure if I'm
Yeah.
missing anything.
I don't either. But if anyone is on who did not let us know prior, I'll just take 1 minute if you want to say something. Okay, well, thank the board. Thank Mr. Ward for a very informative meeting tonight. I think that we learned a lot, and that's really good. And it makes us an even better board for the kind of information we're getting and the engagement we are taking upon ourselves also. So Ms. Pittinger, anything else that we need to do tonight?
No, I think it was good. I would like to ask Mr. Waters if our guest tonight was along the lines of what he was hoping to have incorporated into our meetings. We would invite community folks to come and address you with a particular topic if that's more along what you're looking for.
So I'd like to present that as a proposal during new business at a future meeting. I thought tonight's session was tremendous. It was excellent. I want to echo what Emma just said about helping us do a better job by being smarter, by having information, and I thought it was right on the money. I think if there was anything I would like to have had different about it is I wish we could have publicized it more farther in advance. But I thought it was really tremendous. And so everybody is aware, I did kind of mention to Beth and Emma an idea, and I'll make that as a formal proposal during new business at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Darby.
May I have a motion to adjourn? Dr. Gershon, second. Ms. Waters, it has moved and properly seconded. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll stay connected. Anything you want to share, don't hesitate to let Beth or myself know.
Good night.
night.
Thank you.
Night.
Wonderful.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Excellent.
Everyone.
Good night.
Stay safe.
Yep.
Yes.
Stay well.
Yes, yes.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Mask up. Hi. Hi.